Parents always favored my sister over me and gave her everything including the inheritance, but she ran away with a deadbeat who spent all her money. Now they want me to take care of them in exchange for some money. Growing up, it was clear to me that my parents had a favorite child, and that child was Angela. She was their little princess, the one they doted on, the one who could do no wrong in their eyes. It was as if their whole world revolved around her, and everything she did was met with admiration and praise. Whether it was a small achievement at school or something as simple as her smiling at them, they would just light up with pride and joy. On the other hand, I was the oldest, and my parents were completely different from me. If I needed something, it only came after Angela's needs had been met. If I had a problem, it was rarely a priority. I often felt like an afterthought to them. Between Angela and me, there was never any bad blood. I genuinely liked her, and despite everything, I never felt any resentment toward her. I know in situations like ours, it's common for siblings to develop jealousy or bitterness, but I never saw her as the enemy. She was just my little sister. Of course, there were moments when I wished things were different. I wish I weren't always the one pushed to the side, the one whose needs and feelings came second. But at the same time, I knew it wasn't Angela's fault. She didn't choose to be the favorite, just like I didn't choose to be overlooked. To give you an idea of just how much my parents favored Angela over me, let me share a few examples. Every year on her birthday, we would take a trip to Disneyland. This would be a full day of fun, excitement, and making special memories. It was something Angela always looked forward to, and my parents made sure it was a grand celebration. Meanwhile, when my birthday came around, there were no big trips or elaborate surprises. Instead, we would simply go out for dinner at a local restaurant. The difference was very obvious. Angela's birthday was treated as a major event, while mine felt more like an obligation they had to check off the list. When it came to extracurricular activities, my parents always prioritized Angela. They only had the budget to support one child's after-school hobbies, and they chose her ballet lessons over my tennis training. The frustrating part was that I was actually really good at tennis. I loved playing, and I had the potential to go far, but my parents didn't see it as important. Instead, they told me I should concentrate more on studies rather than spending time on what they saw as just a game. In reality, they just didn't want to invest in me. Angela was never an outstanding student. She never got a grade above a B, but that never seemed to matter. Every report card she brought home, my parents would gush over her efforts, tell her how proud they were, and sometimes even reward her with gifts or a special treat. For me, it was a completely different story. There was no praise, no excitement, and certainly no rewards, even if I secured the first position. I was always expected to get top marks, not because my parents cared about my achievements, but because they wanted me to set a good example for my younger sister, Angela. If I didn't meet their high expectations, I would get scolded, lectured, or made to feel like I had let them down. No matter how hard I worked, my achievements were never acknowledged the way Angela's were. After I grew up and left for university, my parents hardly ever helped me financially. I was expected to take out student loans and figure things out on my own because, according to them, I was independent and responsible enough to handle everything. Meanwhile, when it was Angela's turn to go to college, my parents covered all her expenses without hesitation. Their reasoning was that she was young and couldn't handle the stress of a loan. I felt this was really unfair, as if I didn't deserve the same help just because I had learned to take care of myself. It was frustrating, but by that point, I had pretty much come to accept that this was just the way things were in our family. Angela was given a brand new car the moment she turned 18. My parents proudly handed her the keys. She didn't have to ask, beg, or prove that she needed it. It was simply given to her, no questions asked. Meanwhile, when I needed a car for my part-time job in college, I had to ask my mother multiple times before she finally agreed to let me have her old, beat-up vehicle. It wasn't in great condition, but I was grateful to have anything at all. The problem was that the car constantly broke down. There were days when I would be stuck on the side of the road, desperately trying to get it to start again. Whenever I asked my parents for help with repairs, they refused. My father would tell me that if I wanted to drive, I needed to figure it out myself. So, whenever the car was out of commission, I had no choice but to take the bus to work no matter how inconvenient it was. Whether it was freezing cold, pouring rain, or unbearably hot, I had to find my own way. My parents never seemed to care how difficult it was for me. When my maternal grandparents passed away, my mom inherited everything they left behind. It was a significant amount, and while I never expected to receive any of it myself, I also didn't expect what happened next. Instead of using the money for something meaningful for the whole family, she decided to take a special trip, just her and Angela. I wasn't even told about it. I had no idea they were even going until I saw Angela's social media posts. She had posted pictures of her and mom having fancy dinners, living in a luxurious resort. I was taken aback and asked my sister where this was. She left me on read. Seeing those posts stung in a way I can't even describe. It wasn't just the trip itself, it was the realization that they hadn't even thought to invite me. When I later confronted my mom about it, she gave me weak excuses. She claimed that she had made some last-minute plans with my sister and that both of them weren't sure if I would be free to go. Mom also confessed that she has always connected more with Angela than with me because my sister is more like her, so she didn't think I would mind as much. I started to cry when I heard this because it hurt to hear my own mother say something like this. I realized no matter how hard I tried to be part of the family, I would always be on the outside looking in. When Angela graduated from college, my parents were over the moon. They treated it like the biggest achievement in the world, as if she had done something no one else in our family had ever accomplished. My mother was so proud that she gifted Angela half of my grandparents' inheritance, no strings attached. She told her she could use the money however she wanted, whether it was for travel, a new car, a business idea, or just to enjoy life. It was a massive gift, one that gave Angela a comfortable financial cushion as she stepped into adulthood. Meanwhile, I got nothing. It wasn't that I expected half of the inheritance, but to be completely overlooked yet again was a slap in the face. I had worked hard, put myself through college with little support, and never asked for much. Yet, my mother felt that I didn't deserve any help. When I dared to speak up, when I questioned why Angela was given so much while I was given so little, my parents brushed me off. They told me that, as the oldest, they expected me not to ask them for handouts. That I was supposed to be independent, strong, and self-sufficient. My dad tried to make it sound like a compliment, saying that he believed in me, that I didn't really need their help because I was capable of making it on my own. But that same belief never seemed to apply to Angela. She was always seen as the one who needed more help, the one who had to be protected and provided for. It was frustrating and disheartening that while I was always expected to figure things out alone, Angela was handed everything on a silver platter. Despite everything, I have tried my best not to hold resentment toward my parents for the way they have treated me. I have also done my best not to resent Angela. As much as I love her, I can't ignore the fact that she has never really stood up for me. She has never acknowledged how unfair things had been, never told our parents that what they were doing was wrong. A part of me wishes that, just once, she had spoken up. That she had told them I deserved better. But she never did. She always accepted their generosity without question, never considering how it felt for me to be left behind. And that, more than anything, has been the hardest part for me to move past. Anyway, because my parents had always handed everything to Angela, problems between them started to arise over time. Despite all the money they had gifted her, Angela still chose to move back home after college. She said it was because she wanted to save more money, but in reality, it seemed like she just preferred living off our parents rather than being independent. At first, my parents didn't seem to mind. They had always coddled her, so having her back home was probably comforting for them. But slowly, the situation started to wear on them. Angela wasn't just living with them, she was fully relying on them for everything. She would insist that Dad buy expensive grocery items, not caring how much they cost or whether they fit within the household budget. She never contributed to any expenses, never offered to help with bills, and acted as if their money was hers to spend however she pleased. On top of that, she expected Mom to continue taking care of her like she was still a child. She wouldn't do her own laundry, instead making Mom handle it for her. She didn't help out with any household chores, never lifted a finger to cook or clean, and treated the house like it was her personal hotel. The same parents who had once given her everything without hesitation were now starting to feel the weight of their own choices and were starting to complain. At first, my parents didn't mind, just like they had never minded giving Angela everything she wanted. They had spent years making sure she never had to struggle, so having her live at home rent-free, relying on them for everything, felt normal to them. But since they are also getting older, things started to change. They weren't as energetic as before, and they began to expect Angela to step up a little at least, to take on even the smallest responsibilities. That's when the fight started between them. Anytime they asked her to contribute in any way, whether it was helping with groceries, paying for something, or even just doing simple household chores, Angela would get upset. She felt like it was unfair for them to ask anything of her, when all she wanted to do was just chill at home and play video games. Because Mom had given her half of the inheritance, my sister didn't feel the need anymore to find a job, so she lounged around the house the whole day, doing nothing. But that wasn't the only issue. Angela had also developed a habit of partying all night and coming home at odd hours. My parents would wait up for her, worried, but she didn't care. She was living her life on her terms, without considering how it affected them. My parents, who had always made excuses for her, were now facing the reality of what they had created. They had spent years giving her everything, shielding her from consequences, and now, when they finally needed her to act like an adult, she simply refused. Things took a turn for the worse when Angela met someone online and fell head over heels for him. This guy, Richard, was the definition of a deadbeat. He had no job, no ambition, and no real plans for his future. The only thing he seemed to care about was getting Angela to send him money, and she did. It didn't matter how obvious it was to everyone else that he was using her. My parents and I tried talking to her multiple times, warning her that he was just taking advantage of her, but she refused to listen. Every time we brought it up, she would get defensive, sometimes even furious, insisting that we didn't understand. In her mind, what she was doing wasn't foolish, it was just true love. No matter how much Richard asked for, Angela was always willing to give. She would send him money for rent, food, and even things he didn't really need, like new clothes or video games. It didn't matter that she was still living off my parents, and the money she had was only because of the inheritance. Whatever Richard wanted, she found a way to give it to him. My parents, who had always spoiled her themselves, now had to watch someone else take advantage of their daughter. No matter how much they tried to intervene, Angela wouldn't hear a word against him. She was convinced that helping him was a sign of her loyalty, and she refused to see the reality of the situation. Then, 2 months ago, out of nowhere, Angela decided to run away and get married to Richard. It was completely unexpected. There were no signs, no prior discussions, nothing to indicate that she had even been planning such a big step. One day, she was living at home like usual, and the next, she was gone. She didn't even tell our parents until afterward. We only found out when she video called us from her honeymoon. She proudly announced that she and her new husband, Richard, were planning to travel the world together. And to fund this grand adventure, they were going to use my sister's inheritance or whatever was left of it. This was the same money that my parents had assumed she would use for something responsible, like a house or a stable future. Instead, she was going to be spending it on her deadbeat husband. As you can imagine, my parents were furious. Mom, especially, was livid. She thought she knew her daughter better than anyone. For years, my parents had favored her, given her everything she ever wanted, and now, in their eyes, she had just thrown it all away on a man she barely knew. Suffice it to say, things haven't been the same since. My parents, who once bent over backward for Angela, have finally started seeing the consequences of their actions. They have reduced all communication with her. Now that my sister is no longer their favorite, I've noticed a shift in the way my parents treat me. It's like suddenly, they check in on me, want to go out and have lunch with me, and make an effort to include me in things they never cared about before. My mom, who used to barely acknowledge my presence unless she needed something, now calls me just to chat. She has suddenly started calling me every time she wants to go shopping. For years, I had watched her and Angela go on shopping trips together while I was left out. Now, she acts as if it's normal to include me, as if we've always had this kind of bond. My dad also calls more to ask about my work, my health, and whether I need anything. Family dinners have also changed. Before, they would make plans without ever considering my schedule. I was just an afterthought, invited if it was convenient but never a priority. But now, they arrange family dinners around my availability. They make sure I can attend, check in with me before making plans, and suddenly seem eager for my presence. It's strange, almost unsettling. Even socially, things have changed. If they are now invited to a wedding or a family gathering, they expect me to go with them. It'll be nice to have you there, they say, as if they had always cared about my presence. Meanwhile, when Angela was around, they never bothered to ask if I wanted to go. It's as if they've decided to make me my sister's replacement. Part of me wants to embrace this change, to finally get the attention and care I had longed for as a child. But another part of me remains skeptical. Was this just a matter of convenience because Angela was no longer around to be their perfect daughter? However, unlike Angela, they expect me to also work for them. Like, recently, when my dad fell sick, my mom couldn't help him much because she has a bad back. Suddenly, they expected me to step in and take care of him, no questions asked. When my dad was in the hospital, they wanted me to visit him as much as possible, almost as if it was my responsibility to be there every single day. They expected that I would drop everything and prioritize them, something they never asked of Angela when she was the one they doted on. Then, during Christmas, my parents sat me down for what seemed like an important conversation. They told me that they had decided to give me a portion of the inheritance that my mom had received from her grandparents, the same inheritance that they had previously decided not to pass on to me. Keep in mind, my mom had already given half of it to my sister, so now she wanted to share a part of what was left with me. My mom told me that she and dad felt that they should have always given me the money from the beginning and hoped that now I could use this inheritance to invest wisely or buy myself a new car because, according to them, my 3-year-old car had served its purpose and it was time for an upgrade. I was completely caught off guard. My parents had never done anything remotely this generous for me before. For years, Angela had been the one receiving expensive gifts and financial support, while I had been told to be independent and take care of myself. So naturally, I was suspicious. I looked at them and asked, "Why are you suddenly being so nice to me?" That's when they admitted the truth. My parents sighed and admitted that they had learned their lesson after everything that had happened with Angela. My father added that they both could never trust her again, since she had willingly used all her money just to run off and marry a deadbeat. So, instead of giving her more money, which she would only waste, they had decided to give it to me because they were confident I would use it more responsibly. Mom looked at me and said that in return for their generosity, all they wanted was for me to become their make-do temporary favorite child. She said it so casually, as if it were a completely normal thing to say. According to her, this meant that I should listen to them, be there for them, and take care of them now that they were getting older and had no one else to rely on. Dad chimed in, adding that he had always known I was the more responsible one and he had high hopes for me, that I wouldn't disappoint them the way Angela had. I sat there, staring at them, trying to process what I had just heard. Hearing them say that confirmed what I had already suspected. This wasn't love. This wasn't appreciation. This was like they were trying to bribe me into taking care of them. They had lost Angela as their golden child, so now not only did they want me to replace her, but they also wanted me to cater to them. Their idea of giving me money wasn't because they wanted to make up for the way they had treated me. It wasn't because they regretted all the years they had ignored me. No, it was because they needed something from me now. They were offering me these gifts with strings attached. They expected something in return: my obedience, my presence, my care. They did not value me as a person. It was about securing a safety net for themselves now that Angela was no longer around. In that moment, I realized something painful. My parents never actually changed. They didn't suddenly wake up and see my worth. They just shifted their favoritism because Angela had let them down. And now, I was nothing more than their backup plan. Now, I definitely could have refused the money. I definitely could have protested. I could have called them out on their hypocrisy, pointed out how they had ignored me for years, and told them exactly how I felt. But I didn't. Because, honestly, there was no point. It wasn't like they would suddenly realize their mistakes and apologize. It wasn't like they would finally admit how unfair they had been. Instead, I decided to just take what they were offering. My parents had never given me any financial help before. I had always been the independent one, the one who had to struggle and work for everything, while Angela got handouts. My sister had been spoiled with expensive gifts, free college tuition, a brand new car at 18, and half of my grandparents' inheritance. And what did she do with it? She ran off and spent it all on herself and her husband. Meanwhile, I had worked hard for everything I had, without any help from my parents. She had already received more than enough from my parents over the years. So, if they finally wanted to give me something, who was I to refuse? So, I kept my mouth shut and accepted the money. However, ever since that, my parents' expectations of me have only grown. It's like every day they feel more and more entitled to me. My mother constantly needs me to drive her around, even though she is perfectly capable of driving on her own. If I refuse, she immediately reminds me, after everything I've given you, you can't even do this one small thing for me? She acts like the money she gave me was some kind of lifelong contract, binding me to her every whim. My dad is no different. He now expects me to handle everything for him, paying his bills, ordering things online, filling out paperwork, making appointments, fixing things around the house. If he needs anything, he calls me first, as if I'm his personal assistant rather than his child. It's frustrating because although I did expect them to call me for help occasionally, I never expected that the entire burden would be all on me. These were never things they asked of Angela. She was never expected to be responsible for anything, but with me, it's like they assume I owe them my time and effort just because they finally decided to acknowledge me. And I hate it. On top of managing my own life and work, I now have to constantly think about my parents and their endless demands. It's exhausting, overwhelming, and incredibly unfair. I never asked for this money. But now, it feels like they only gave them to me so they could use them as leverage. To make things even worse, yesterday, my mom fell down the stairs. She had to be taken to the hospital, and the doctors ordered her to stay on bed rest for at least 2 weeks. Now, my dad called me and asked me to move in with them so I could take care of mom 24/7. I was completely caught off guard. I told him that while I could visit every evening, there was no way I could just drop everything and move in to care for her full time. Dad pushed back, saying they had given me money specifically for this reason, so skipping work wasn't a big deal. But I stood my ground. I told him he couldn't just dictate my life and that I refused to become their full-time caregiver. Now, my parents are upset and are accusing me of being too full of myself. So, Reddit, am I the a-hole here? Update 1. I've seen a lot of people asking why I didn't just refuse the money or why I'm still engaging with my parents after everything they put me through. The truth is, I don't want to regret not helping them. As much as I resent the way they treated me growing up, they're still my parents. A part of me feels like if I completely cut them off, I might look back one day and feel guilty for not being there when they needed me. They're getting older, and while I know they're only turning to me now because Angela disappointed them, I can't help but feel some responsibility. Maybe it's the years of being forced into the mature and responsible role, or maybe it's just my own conscience, but I don't want to be the kind of person who walks away and later wonders, what if I had done more? That said, I also don't want to be taken advantage of. Ever since my parents started treating me like their new favorite, their expectations have been overwhelming. I'm trying to find a balance. I don't want to completely cut them out of my life, but I also don't want to let them guilt trip me into being at their beck and call. If they truly regret how they treated me in the past, they need to show it through their actions, not just by suddenly expecting me to step up and replace Angela. I haven't fully decided how to handle everything yet. In the end, I hired a caretaker for my mom and I am covering the entire cost. However, my dad isn't happy with this decision. He insists that no outsider can take care of mom the way a family member can. He thinks that I'm being selfish, but I don't care anymore. I can't keep them happy all the time. This is the best choice for everyone. Also, for everyone asking, yes, my sister is perfectly fine. She and her husband are still traveling and enjoying life. She video calls us once in a while, usually just to check in, but my parents barely tolerate her now. They're still furious about how she betrayed them by running off and using the money they gave her to fund her own adventures instead of, I guess, staying home and relying on them forever. It's honestly strange to see how quickly their love for her has turned into resentment. For years, Angela could do no wrong in their eyes, and now, they act like she's the worst person in the world. It's not that she suddenly became a bad person. She's just doing what she's always done, putting herself first. The only difference is that now, it no longer benefits them. Update 2. It's been 2 weeks since my last update. I finally sat down and had an open conversation with my parents. I told them everything, how I had felt growing up with them, how I had watched them favor Angela over me time and time again, and how it made me feel inadequate, like I was never enough for them. I explained that now, with Angela out of the picture, it felt like they were just using me as a replacement rather than genuinely caring about me. I also made it very clear that just because they had suddenly decided to give me money didn't mean I owed them anything. I told them how exhausting it was to be treated like their personal assistant, constantly expected to run errands, pay bills, and handle everything for them. I wasn't their servant, and I refused to be guilt-tripped into taking care of them when they had spent years pushing me aside. At first, they argued. They tried to justify their actions, saying things like, "We didn't think that you would mind and we just thought you were capable enough to handle everything," as if that somehow made up for their behavior. But I stood my ground. In the end, they actually listened. It took a while, but they understood. They even apologized, in their own awkward, hesitant manner. It's not a perfect resolution, and I don't think our relationship will dramatically improve overnight. After all, this is the first time that I have ever talked to them about my feelings. At least now, they know that if they want me in their life, they need to treat me with the respect I deserve. Update 3. It's been 4 months since my last update. I took some of your advice and decided to go to therapy. Honestly, it has been one of the best decisions I've made for myself. It's helped me process a lot of the emotions I've buried over the years, and I'm slowly learning to set boundaries with my parents without feeling guilty. Surprisingly, my parents have also been understanding these past few months. They haven't been pushing me for help as much, and they don't expect me to be at their beck and call anymore. We still spend time together, but it actually feels normal now, like a genuine parent-child relationship rather than an obligation. It's not perfect, but it's much better than before. Meanwhile, as I knew would happen, Angela has been trying to make her way back. Turns out, all the money she had is gone, and her husband still refuses to get a job. She reached out to me recently for help, but I refused. I knew that if I gave in once, she would keep coming back, and I'm not about to start funding her lifestyle. She also went to my parents, hoping they'd take her back in, but they actually stood their ground. My father straight up told her that she was on her own this time. So now, Angela and her husband are living in his parents' basement. I do hope she eventually figures things out and learns to take care of herself.